All right. Hello, guys, and welcome back to the Southwick Report. Hope you all are having a good day, and sorry for being behind schedule. I had some technical issues that I had to work through. Not going to get into those just yet. Uh, and also, I'm not sleeping very well right now, so for the time being, all of our streams are going to start being held at noon instead of at 9. So, hopefully then more people will be able to watch, and hopefully then I can actually start sleeping again. So, a lot of hopes. We'll see what happens. But to start out today, we got some decently major news. Specifically, draft registration. It is becoming automatic. They're going to start automatically enrolling people when they become of age. And by people, it's still military-aged men. It's not including women as far as I can tell. But it is going to be automatic. It isn't supposed to start until December of 2026. The link to this article will be in the description. They will be having a public hearing to where they need to discuss it because that is required by law in order for them to pass something like this. Which, whenever we get the details for that, we will let you know because this cannot pass. This is another form of indentured servitude by the hands of the government. And if you are forcing people to serve a government or a cause that they don't believe in, that is essentially slavery. It either is essentially or it is just 100% slavery. These are people who are giving up their lives to fight for a cause, which nowadays, what is that cause even for? It's clearly not for liberty. The government's already killed off most of our liberties, and they're still killing it off. Don't get me wrong, we're still one of the freest nations on the planet, but that's also not saying much. There's really no free country in this globe anymore, and we really need to start sparking the ideals of liberty. Right now, we are at a low point. People are very demoralized, especially on the libertarian side, because we're the third largest party in the country. And keep in mind, being the third largest, we barely crack 6%. Actually, we've only cracked 6% once. We barely crack 1 to 2%. At least in the party aspect. We'll still get votes in the Republican primaries, but even Ron Paul, he only came like third at best. So it's important to stay optimistic because we are making growth. But it's also really hard to stay optimistic when we're seeing how slow that growth is. But we really need to get into the mindset that slow growth is good growth. When Ron Paul came in, he sparked that growth. And it has not stopped growing. Trump has been a hump in that progress because he campaigned on a lot of libertarian principles and has not kept true to most of them. Remember, he came in saying he wasn't going to start any new wars. He came in saying that he was going to, well, I guess he never really said anything about free markets, but a lot of people believed that he believed in free markets because he was so anti-regulation. And we hope that that would be a step in the right direction. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. The reason for that, we didn't see the character underneath. We didn't see his past business ventures. We didn't see how much of a con man he is. And we got scammed. Unfortunately, we did. It's going to take a long time before we regain our trust after we decided to put our backing behind Trump. Don't get me wrong, I didn't think Kamala Harris was a good candidate either. In fact, I'm fairly confident she was one of the worst candidates that any party has ever put forward. But at this point, I wonder, excuse me. At this point, I wonder if she would have been as bad as Trump. Because Trump has definitely profited a lot more off of the office than we have seen since Lyndon Johnson. But the one thing I will give Trump is that all of his corruption is out in public right now. If it was Harris, it would have all been swept under the rug. There's no question about that. So ultimately, there was no winning that election, and we're noticing that now. I've been a lot more optimistic about the future, though, because I'm seeing a lot more people, not only online, but also just in interviews. Liberty is still being talked about. People are still talking about freedom in one way or another, and it is bipartisan. Both parties are talking about it because it is not a partisan issue. The only people who find liberty to be a dangerous ideal are the socialists, which are the most dangerous ideal in this country right now. So, with that being said, I don't see us having too many issues with spreading these ideas. Our ideas will be coming forward at some point. We don't know if it'll be under this government. We won't know if it's under this country. This country is going to last. The government won't. That's just the facts. And I think it's important that we realize that because it's not necessarily a bad thing. Governments come and go. People will say China, Egypt, all of them, they lasted as long as they did. They had dynasties that lasted roughly as long as the US has made. And at some point, when you get large enough, you eventually collapse. And given the state of our current economic system, our current foreign policy, and our current monetary policy, I don't see us lasting very long. Now, gold has been taking a hit recently, and that's because somehow the dollar must be regaining some of its value back. But the national debt, there's some warning signs there. We are now at 39.1 trillion. That is astronomically bad. And at some point, the bill is going to come due. Other countries are going to stop trusting the dollar. They're going to stop using it as the reserve currency of the world. And they're probably going to go back to using precious metals. I don't think another country is going to use a reserve currency because I don't know if any other country is going to trust that government. Because right now the other big players are Russia and China, which, let's face it, they rose to power because of our nonstop meddling overseas. And quite frankly, the only reason China receives business right now is because the US has been absolutely horrible when it comes to dealing with foreign trade. We need to go back to free trade. Not going to happen under this administration. But there is hope. I do believe there is hope. People are starting to wake up to this idea. A lot of the classical liberals are starting to see what is going on. They're starting to move away from the Democratic Party, and they're starting to move towards true ideals of liberty, which is a good thing for sure. I think a lot of conservatives are realizing how bad our financial policy has been. Most Republicans are in some way free market, whether that's completely free market or whether that's somewhat free market, which if they're a somewhat free market, that's a good starting point. We can work with that. However, we do have to understand that just because they will agree with some of our views, we can't completely welcome them in. But then again, we also shouldn't be collectivizing like that. We shouldn't be. We're kind of forced to right now, given the current system. But hopefully the goal will be that the party establishment will fall, and we go back to a political system where the only thing that politicians will focus on is building coalitions. They build groups around single ideas. That is going to be what is key. That is going to be where we learn the most about each individual, and that is where individuals are going to make the best change. Any form of collectivizing never works. Collectivism failed policy because it puts the idea in that people are stupid and that they need to come together to be smart. I mean, it's a very bad definition, but it's as close as I can get right now. Whereas individualism, it focuses on building yourself up and then building collective groups that share your values. When people come together and they use their individual skills to contribute to something, that is when people succeed. The problem comes is when you forcefully group people together who do not have shared interests. You cannot force that. You have to let it come naturally. That's always been the case. Every form of history, when people who don't like each other are forced together, people die. Whether that be the West and the Middle East, whether that be Russia in the Middle East, whether that be Germany throughout Europe, people will die. It's horrible, but it's a fact of life. And I firmly believe that people are starting to wake up to this idea because we are seeing the backlash that the Iran war is getting. And I'm starting to think that people are realizing the danger that this is causing. I hope that things change in the future, and I'm sure that they will. But as of now, we need to continue the fight. We need to continue the fight for liberty. And when we are at our most demoralized, that's when we need to shout louder. Well, not shout, we need to speak louder. Because we cannot let ourselves fall into the trap that nothing is going to get fixed. Because as soon as that thought enters our mind, then nothing actually gets fixed. And if nothing gets fixed, it's going to be fixed through what? Firearms. It's going to be fixed through bloodshed. And quite frankly, I don't want that to be the case. We are non-interventionists. Our hope is to seek peaceful means. And I really, really hope we don't need to pay our debt to the Tree of Liberty. In case you're not familiar, Thomas Jefferson was quoted saying the Tree of Liberty was paid for by the blood of patriots. Sorry, not was, is. He's not wrong. But I'm hoping that that debt is not going to be paid in our lifetime. And I hope that we can fix it before we have to. I believe that there's a chance. I believe it can happen whether this government stays in place or whether it collapses. Whether that be through monetary policy or whether that be through revolution. At some point it will fall and something else will take its place. Empires can only last so long, and we are reaching the end of our lifespan. Doesn't mean that the United States of America or the Constitution is going to become null and void. It's a possibility, but we have to be prepared. Because as soon as the government shows weakness, that is when all of the ideas are going to start flooding in. And I think the worst of those ideas is socialism. We really need to make sure that socialism does not become the new norm of our country. It has become too popular amongst the Democrats. Republicans are starting to embrace it. And we need to watch out for that. As soon as socialism takes over, then it will need to be an armed revolution. Because as soon as a socialist government comes into place, you cannot get rid of it without the use of arms. But there is still a lot of pushback against socialism on both parties. Not as much on the Democrats. The Democrats are becoming a lot more socialist. We saw that in New York. I streamed the socialists taking over New York. But there is still hope that someone will come up and will take on the mantle of leading us into a new libertarian movement. Hopefully we get another Tea Party started up, and hopefully we get a larger audience that moves towards true political change. I believe it will happen. I believe our time is yet to come. We are in a dark period right now, and that's why we need to stay our most hopeful. So, without further ado, thanks for watching. I hope you weren't too depressed during this stream. I want to thank you for coming to the Southwick Report, and I hope to see you again soon. So, have a good one.